Hello, welcome to week one, chapter one, transportation, the critical link in the supply chain. Welcome to this brand new journey. As we have studied all the concepts in introduction to supply chain, in logistics and inventory thus far, we have seen just a small examples of just how much transportation sector has on the supply chain. With this course, we are going to go in an in-depth look at four different modes. If you took a look at your book, you see on the cover there are several different modes of transportation that's depicted there. You have the freight liner truck, you have the jet, you have the freight liner on the ocean liner, and you also have the railroads and a pipeline. So again, although it makes for a very interesting cover, that is just the tip of the iceberg. I'm very excited on how we're going to look just how much transportation has, the effect it has on the supply chain, and how this could be a career field for you within the supply chain field. Let us look at this week's objectives. So the chapter focus, we need to look at the role that transportation plays in improved supply chain integration, helping organizations to be more efficient. And as we look at the chapter organization, we look at the concepts, the dimensions of the transportation, fundamentals, and of course the role of transport in the supply chain. Although this chapter is merely introductory, you will learn some key concepts that will help you as we cover the other chapters throughout the semester. When we talk about the economics of transportation, we got to realize it impacts all of our daily lives, our safety, our social interaction, our economic well-being, the quality of life, and the economic impact speaks volumes. When we look at the demand for transportation, I want you all to just take just a few moments to reflect on the transportation landscape in your own area of the world, whether you be in the area in which the UAHT service area or area outside of the UAHT service area. But think about these things. What about your region or our region that tend to specialize in certain economic activities? What industry is predominant in our neck of the woods? Also, when you think about the specialization, what about that physical gap, the markets and the areas of production for that given good? And does this gap actually create demand for transport? And so as we think about we go back to introduction to business, we have the fundamentals cornerstone of supply and demand gap. We again can apply that to our own region. When we think about measurement units and how we're measuring the goods, we are actually doing it by ton miles with freight and passenger miles with people. And so this is also heterogeneous, but the two units have to have very different cost of production and very different service requirements. When we think about the aggregation, we think about the output by the freight of the passenger, the output by the mode, and of course by the carrier or the market share. When we think about all these together, we can see how it can have an economic impact and cause either a strong or a weak link in the supply chain. As you read through your chapter this week and as you view the corresponding PowerPoint that I am displaying for you now, you can see the different types of miles, the modal split for higher passenger miles. See how that has changed over the several years from 1990 to 2006. Now, again, these numbers are a few years old, so you can actually do like a Google search or go into the Department of Transportation's Bureau of Transportation Statistics now has a link online, and I believe I do have a link to that website, and you can see the most updated. I believe the last year's information was 2015. I may have a link to that, or if not, I will put one on there for you all to review. As we look at elasticity, we're going to go now into the price elasticity of demand. So sometimes those price changes can be measured in percent, and it also can be divided into the change in price. So when we're saying that something is price elastic, what we are saying is demand is sensitive to the changes in price. And if it's inelastic, demand is insensitive to price change. I'd like for you to think about that just compare that to a rubber band, okay? And so again, if you need some kind of, symbol or something to help you remember that price elastic, that price inelastic, the rubber band. Let's say that the price elastic, that rubber band can expand. Some rubber bands can expand pretty huge, depending on the size. If it's not, then it'll break. So think about that in relation to the elasticity. When we look at the price elasticity of demand, again, if the percentage changes in quantity that's greater or equal to the percentage change in price, then sometimes that demand is inelastic. And those increases can also cause revenue to go up, and then the reduction can go to revenue reduction if it goes down. But if it is price elastic, the price increases, it'll go to a revenue reduction, and then it also can lead to your revenue increase in the prices of reduction. So you can see that again, it is a fluid relationship. When we think about that again, we talk about aggregate demand, and again, it's sometimes is price inelastic, and demand for a particular mode or carrier sometimes can be price elastic, and there can be some substitutions available for that. And then we also want to slide in service elasticity as well. When we talk about derived demand in freight transportation, we want to make sure that we understand that definition is we can move a product to a certain location, but it is also dependent upon the existence of a demand to consume or use that product at that location. And it is the relationship between that price and quantity demand. And when you think about aggregate demand for freight transport, it can't be easily affected by individual carrier actions. So figure 1-1 shows the derived demand for freight transportation relationship. When we think about price elasticity, we're also going to think about the value. And when we think about transportation costs, we look at things like landed cost, like how much does it cost to produce something? How much is that transportation cost from that production point to the market? How much money is that going to entail from point A to point B? When we think about the transport costs, we also want to think about the advantage and disadvantage versus our competitors and also market value. Now, we will talk a little bit about place or utility concept in chapter 2 and how that can actually be a direct relation to landed cost. But we also look at the landed cost, that how much is a producer's market and how much is that value of that transport service. And again, figure 1-2, and this chart is in your textbook, shows the illustration of demand and the landed cost, giving you an example between Chicago and Boston and how much the cost will be. As you can see, the maximum transport, the cost could be at $1, but the production cost in Chicago is actually going to be $3. Production cost goes up actually $4. You see where that dollar is actually in the middle of those 2 points from points A to B. So you think back to place utility. We also look at the extended market areas as well in a 200-mile radius. So when we think about the value, we also look at our service components. We look at transit times. We look at how reliable the transit time is, and also how accessible, how capable, and of course, always safety stock, securities, and stock out cost. Again, these are all concepts that we studied in length in Introduction to Supply Chain course last fall. When we look at the value of transport service, we also want to look at the location of economic activity. How much is going on in that particular region's economy? Is it flat, or are you seeing increase in one sector and a decrease in the other? When they talk about that, they want to give you historical context. Sometimes transportation influences location of cities, and also they're talking about ports, about sea. For firms, sometimes the transport influences the location of the manufacturing plants and where those facility distribution centers are. And influences can be dynamic. Economic activity, sometimes those locations shift, and then therefore that pattern of transport demands also follows that same shift. Once I think about the supply chain concept. So as well as I always say, supply chain management has been a part of the business field forever, it seems like. But it seems like it was a sleeping giant. We knew what it was, but those that worked in the field knew how that was important. But as we study it, as we now get into research, there are several colleges now have several departments that are now dedicated to supply chain management research, lean management, operations management. And so in the 1960s, that's where supply chain slowly started waking up, so to speak. Slowly started being, I had attention on its importance into business. In the 60s, they came up with the physical distribution concept. By the 1980s, we started seeing more emphasis on business logistics or integrated logistics. And in the 90s, here comes the supply chain management concept. And again, it is a systems approach which analyzes and it's a decision making that's common to all three phases. So as we think about that sleeping giant, so to speak, it is a cornerstone for our business. When we think about that, we also look at the part of it as the physical distribution. We think about that distribution system with the physical distribution system costs and trade-offs. The main objective is always to find that lowest total physical cost, distribution system cost. And sometimes examples can be found in our transportation carrier selection. Sometimes that trade-off has to be between transport, between materials handling, packaging cost, inventory. As we look more about the business logistics concept, we think about the analysis of inbound or sourcing. Development is also facilitated by the economic deregulation by the government. We look at the rising degree of international global sourcing, the global economy. Sometimes additional opportunities for cost savings through the integrated management and coordination is present. But the notion that logistics contributes to a customer service and revenue generation, it begins to emerge. So we're seeing that relationship develop. While we study why the key underlying principles of supply chain management and just what it actually means to business, we look at three key flows. We got the product, the information, and cash. And sometimes the most direct influence on product flow is through transport. The product flow is a two-way street. It grows in importance of reverse logistics systems. And so as you can see the integrated supply chain, you see each of the major players. You have your suppliers, you have your distributors, your manufacturers, your wholesalers, and retailers and customers. It's the art and science. Again, it integrates the flows of the products, the information about those products, and the financials through the entire supply pipeline from the supplier's supplier to the customer's customer. So again, it goes tiers into product, services, information, and finances. When we look at the information flow, replenishment orders is also upstream, and they can also forecast downstream demand. Sometimes when we look at transport carriers, they contribute to the uncertainty reduction. It's reliable and fast deliveries. Or an improved two-way info flow where the advanced shipment notices, the barcodes, radio frequency tags, that's where technology actually comes in and is a major player in how the information about those products and services are transmitted. When we also talk about the finances, again, a very important concept. Sometimes we got to figure out how those payments can flow upstream of the goods ordered. With technology, that has made that somewhat easier. If we have an order and a replenishment cycle shortened, if the orders and products flow faster, then cash can also flow faster. And that's sort of a no-brainer when you think about that. The high transport service levels can contribute to improved customer service and faster cash flow. So the faster that you get the materials there, the faster you're going to get your money. And that is a very simple concept. So as you review this week, I hope you have enjoyed the first chapter of the transportation book. If you have any questions, please let me know. I would invite you at this time to take a few moments and to please look up some updated facts and figures of some of the charts that we studied in this chapter.